But not the Zoom people see my screen with the note. Yeah.
Okay.
So I should see now the screen. Okay. Hi, welcome everyone. My name is Eva Goldman, and I have the pleasure to present to you today also on behalf of my colleagues. Some of them are even here today from FEEBLE and from our partner organizations on the topic of never change a running system, balancing system approach and comparability when adapting long-term experiments. So in this presentation, I want to share with you some insights from the journeys that our long-term experiments have taken. Now figuring out techniques. So what long-term experiments am I talking about? That's our long-term experiment farming system comparison trials in the tropics, SYSCOM. It's the overall objective of this trial or this program is to compare the performance of organic with conventional systems in the tropics. And we have 4 different trials located in 3 different countries that all follow this same approach or same objective, but have different approaches. So in Kenya, we are comparing maize-based farming systems at high and low input level. In India, we're working with cotton-based farming systems, comparing also biodynamic treatments and using GMO cotton seeds. And in Bolivia, we are working on cacao and comparing monoculture against agroforestry systems. So how does that look like? In the upper row, you see how these sites have looked like in 2007 when those trials were first established. Mostly were fallow plots or hardly used agriculturally. And then in the lower row, you see how these plots look like today. So the sites have grown, buildings have been built, but also the plots have developed, which you can see, I think, most easily in Bolivia, where our trees have become more mature and bigger. And when we were first designing these trials, we were following let's say a comparison or a multifactorial approach where we try to let's say incorporate or design our systems based on existing farming systems in these regions. So for example, conventional or organic farming systems in the regions that we are located. But as you might imagine that in 2007, there weren't that many comparable or reference farming systems in those respective regions. So we have followed this approach of substitution, so substituting synthetic pesticides in conventional systems with organic pesticides in the organic systems. But overall, each treatment has followed similar patterns when it comes to crop rotation or timing of application. And now I want to show you where that got us or what we have gotten out of this. This is now the average yields of the years from 2007 up to 2019. In orange, the conventional systems, in green, the organic ones. And we can see that in some cultures or some crops, such as soybean in India or maize in Kenya, that organic was able to be at par with the conventional systems. However, when it came to more demanding crops in terms of nutrient management or pest management, such as potato or cotton, there was quite a huge yield gap between the organic and the conventional systems. And actually, cotton is quite an interesting case here because we see this is kind of the yield gap that we've seen in the long-term experiment. But when we look at what we found in farmer spheres. So this data is based on farmer surveys on the yields that they have achieved. We see that there's huge difference between the farmers in these different systems, in the conventional and in the organic systems. But on the average, this difference between the conventional and the organic is actually not that huge, which for us mostly showed us it was very insightful to see that innovative farmers are able to achieve actually high yields, or yields that are at par, or sometimes even higher than some of their conventional peers. When they manage to adapt their farming practices to the local conditions, soil, weather, market, or labor availability, they have been able to achieve their best possible outcome under organic farming. So based on this idea, we then in the long-term experiment started exploring ideas coming from system approaches. So in system approaches, you wouldn't any longer compare one treatment on like factorial levels to another treatment, but you would rather set objectives for each treatment and compare the results of the treatment to these set objectives. So you would kind of compare the system within itself. So within the objectives, for example, reducing dependency on external inputs, or the harmful impact on the environment, or integrating crop and livestock production together. So the aim was to integrate some of this approach to manage organic systems as a diversified and interlinked complex systems in order to achieve the best possible outcome on the level of yield or soil fertility, reduction of external inputs. And some examples of how we have done it. So that meant for us the integration of a more diversified either crop rotation or also monocropping, interchanging a monocropping system towards an intercropping systems, such as also including push-pull approaches, or adapting our soil management and tillage. And what did that get us in terms of yield? This is an example from Kenya on French beans. So Kenya is quite a complex crop rotation. So French beans is only produced every 3 years. So that's why you only see data 11, 14, and 17. And the green line is the average over these 3 years. And the system approach was first implemented in 2019. So 20 was next time French beans. And we see that in this season, following this system approach, it was possible that the organic for the first time was better than the conventional yields. So of course we have to see how this develops in the future, but for us this was quite an interesting result. Slightly similar trend we can see in India in the cotton-based farming system. So you see here above the line in the BT conventional farming and below the organic and green. And you also see that there has been over the years always kind of a constant gap between those two systems. And in 2021-22 was now the first time that organic was at par with the conventional, or sometimes even slight outperforming of conventional systems. So of course, this is a very recent data, and we have to see how this develops. So wrapping up, change along the way, we did change, and it did yield us some benefits. It did yield an improvement of some organic or some performance indicators of organic. However, the farming systems react differently to changes depending on the crop, the site, and season. So we might not see these developments in all of the crops or all of the sites. So adaptation is also a continuous process that we have to reevaluate constantly. And there we are coming into also some limitations in the ideas of a long-term experiment, because of course we cannot change every other year our management practices, because it would hamper the benefits that such a long-term experiment can offer. And also we are working on plot size level. So some objectives or some innovative ideas that say integrating livestock or agroforestry might not be possible on plot sizes of 16 by 16 meters. And then this is a bit of a more tricky aspect, I would say, when moving away from this multi or factorial approaches of comparing one thing against the other and working on really this set of system objectives, it can be more difficult to also publish these results, because we are very much used to getting interested in the performance of organic fertilizer against phosphate, triple superphosphate or something. And if we would move further down the road of system approach, our different treatments might only be comparable through meta values such as energy consumption, for example. And last but not least, long-term experiments and these changes that we have seen that were only possible over the long term also need a long-term funding. So it's not easy to provide a final answer on system performance within 5 or 10 years. And with that, I would close, and thanks to our partners, or thank to you for your attention, also in the name of our partners and our colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eva, for your great presentation and for the great work that you and your team are doing back there in those countries. My question is, did you try maybe to involve some farmers and to see if there is feasibility on them adopting this kind of experiments?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that is an integral part of our program, but due to kind of focus time, I did not mention it. So each of the countries also has like a participatory on-farm research component where also these we aim to also integrate some ideas that are proven in farmers' fields, for example. So certain crop rotation changes in India, for example, we incorporated into the LTE. Or, for example, if there's an idea of changing density of plants, we can test it also in the participatory research part with the farmers. So there is this kind of feedback loop. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, you didn't miss it, but it's 4 repetitions in India, and then it's also 4 in Kenya. But then in Kenya, we have 2 sites, so it's 4 and 4. So it's 2 sites and 4 repetitions, and Bolivia is also 4 repetitions. Yeah. Yeah, sure.
There are questions online.
Yeah. It says how the treatment affected or improved soil biological diversity over the years. If you did, can you give any insight whether the conventional or the organic system is improving or affecting soil biological diversity? So we have a couple of studies that are coming out just now on microbiological diversity, and there we see that of course the composition of microbiological community does change with the application of chemical or synthetic fertilizers, and other like macrofauna. We also have some data there. from Bolivia and India and Kenya. So from all of the countries on termites and or ants or earthworms. So that we see that that organic or that there's less diversity in the conventional systems. But of course, this is not like holistic over all the different fauna groups. Yeah.
Hi, Aminata. Can you share your presentation?
Okay. Is it okay?
Yes, yeah, but can you turn to presenter or presentation mode?
Okay. Thanks. Hi, everyone. So I'm Aminata Ganeme from Joseph Kizerbo University of Burkina Faso. And today I will present to you one part of my research work entitled Improving the Productivity of Sorghum Cowpea Intercropping System through Varietal Diversity in Sudano-Sahelian Zone of Burkina Faso. So in introduction, intercropping is a cropping system widely practices in rural area in sub-Saharan Africa. And it is an agroecological practice with multiple advantages for soil and crops, like soil fertility improvements, weed management, facilitating the acquisition of nutrients for cereal, and improving crop productivity. Despite these multiple advantages of intercropping system, some low yields were recorded in rural area in Burkina Faso, especially in the semi-arid zone of the country. This is the reason why our study have to of main objective to improve the productivity of the major intercropping system practices in rural area by farmers using the diversity varieties. Specifically, our study aim to characterize the most practices intercropping system by farmers and identify the most productive varieties in the system. And finally, we aim to identify the most influential agromorphological traits on crop yields. So our studies was conducted in two locations. The first one is in farmers' plots in the center-north region of the country. And the second one, we conducted some experimentation in a research station located in the southwest region of the country. So we conducted two major activities, and the first one consisted to individual surveys with 170 farmers. Among them, we set up a network of farmers plots, and we do a monitoring of management practice during the 2017 rainy season. And the second activities, we identify with farmers 11 potential cowpea varieties, and we use these varieties in a intercropping system with the same sorghum varieties, which is one of most varieties used by farmers in their plots. And for this experimentation, we use a split plot design with 4 replications. And in each replication, we grow the 11 varieties in sole crop and in intercropping with the sorghum. And in intercropping plots, we have 1/3 of seed oil are combined. In this plot, we have sorghum and cowpea in the same seed oil. And the experimentation was conducted in 2 rainy seasons at 2018 and 2019 on a sandy loam soil, and we use one dose of NPK at 14 days after sowing two weeding was made in the plot at 14 days after sowing and 2 weeks later. And in this experimentation, we collected data on cycle duration of the varieties. We measure of morphological trait of varieties sorghum and cowpea, and biomass assessment at 3 stages at 40 days after sowing, at flowering, and at maturity. And also we evaluate the grain yield. We calculate and name this the land equivalent ratio. We've compared the performance of intercropping system to sole crop. And if the total land equivalent ratio is above than 1, this indicated the intercropping is more advantageous than sole crop. And we do some statistical comparison for the result we get. So for result for the first activity, during our surveys, most of farmers, 98% of them practice the intercropping system, and more than 60% of the farmers were grown in intercropping system. We identify 3 types of intercropping system in farmers' plots, and the same seed oil intercropping, which is the most practices by more than 90% of farmers. And we also identify the inter-row intercropping and the inter-seed oil intercropping. According to farmers, the same seed oil intercropping is the best one in terms of crop insurance, land management, and time saving during the sowing. And we also identify 12 sorghum varieties in farmers' plots and 4 cowpea varieties. And we saw that the landrace were the most used by farmers. Just 1 sorghum and 1 cowpea improved varieties were monitoring in the farmers' plots. And during the yield assessments, we show that the yields are very low in farmers' plots, with an average yield less than 500 kilograms per hectare, and most of farmers' plots get yields less than this average yields. The same observation is made with cowpea, with an average yield of less than 300 kilograms per hectare. And when we evaluate the different varieties in the research station, we have some yields. Here we compare the yields, sorghum yields in intercropping in red color, and the sorghum yields in sole crop in blue color. So we show that the yields are higher in sole crop than in intercropping, but the advantage is that in intercropping we have 2 crops. So we have sorghum varieties with yields present here, but in addition we have cowpea yields at approximately 300 kilograms per hectare, in addition to sorghum yield here presented. Also, correlation, we do some correlation between the sorghum grain yields in intercropping and the cowpea morphological trait, and we show that a positive interaction correlation with between branch length of cowpea and the sorghum yield. This show that the more the sorghum, the cowpea is spread, more it be favorable to sorghum yields, contrary to sorghum cycle duration, which negatively influence the sorghum intercrop sorghum yields in the system. This is the reason why we have the lowest grain yield, sorghum grain yield, with Pisnu local, which is one of the latest varieties in the pool studied. So when we study the productivity of the different varieties, so here we present the cowpea partial LAR and the sorghum partial land equivalent ratio. And here we show that whole cowpea partial land equivalent ratio was above to 0.17, which is density in the intercropping. This shows that we have a gain yield for sorghum in this system comparatively to sorghum, which only the 4 varieties shown here have a gain yield because the partial area is above to 0.83. So, but if we regard to the total land equivalent ratio, all the varieties have a total land equivalent ratio above than 1, show that it is an advantageous in intercropping system for all these varieties compared to sole crop. But this study shows that it is a trade-off between sorghum and cowpea productivity in the system. Higher, we have sorghum yield, lower, we have cowpea yield. But we identify that the 4 varieties which are the best productivity, because with this variety, we have a gain yield in crop sorghum and a gain yield in cowpea. These varieties represent the best variety for this system. And these varieties is all improved varieties, and they have also a short cycle length. In conclusion, we can say that for our first activity, we show that the traditional intercropping is the most widely used by farmers, and land raise is preferred by farmers for this cropping system. And for our second activity, we show that intercropping improves the productivity of all varieties, the global productivity, and the best variety identified in this study was some improved and short cycle length varieties. We also show that branch length of sorghum of cowpea positively influence the sorghum grade yield in intercropping, contrary to sorghum, the cowpea cycle length, which can negatively influence the sorghum intercrop sorghum yield. In this area, the sorghum is the main staple crop of farmers, and it is important to choose the right cowpea varieties for optimum system productivity. And we would to continue our research by understanding the interspecific interaction by testing different sowing density and sowing dates, and modeling the potential of sorghum, cereal legume intercropping system in future climates. And then thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to answer your questions. Hello?
Hey, thank you, Anya. Thank you. Aminata, can you hear us right now?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So now we have time for some questions from the audience. No, not from the from online. Nothing from online. So I have some questions. Yes, the plant-plant interaction is a very important issues in this intercropping systems. You say at the end that the right cowpea variety is important, and how would you define the right cowpea variety?
Yeah. Yes.
So which kind of characteristic should this the right cowpea variety?
In this study, we show that the spread varieties is better, is better for the intercropping, and the cowpea with a short cycle length is also better for this intercropping system.
Yes, but in this case, you say shorter cycle, that means they have the shorter vegetative or the growing period, right? Are they
Yeah.
also cultivars at less yield normally?
Yeah, I tell that it is important to have a short cycle. Yes, the yield is important, but in our case, the sorghum is the staple crop, and they add cowpea in the system because they do not have enough land to do separately the both. So they put them together to land management. So sorghum is the main staple crop. Then it is important to choose a cowpea variety which will not influence negatively the sorghum in the system.
Yeah. But if I understand correctly, in the page 11 of your slides, your comparison based on the comparison with the pure stand of this specific variety, right?
Yeah.
So that means that if you have, it could be that in some cases you show the benefit of this intercropping, but doesn't guarantee the maximum yield from the farmers. Do you consider this these two different aspects?
Yes, but we do not present all the results. Because here you present only the grain yield of sorghum, but we have also the grain yield of cowpea in soil and in intercropping. But here, regarding to time, I only present the sorghum grain yields. Because at the end, I tell that there is a trade-off between sorghum and cowpea productivity in the system. Is if the farmer want to have more sorghum than cowpea, he will put more density. The density of sorghum will be more than those of cowpea in the system. And inversely, if the farmers want to have more cowpea yield than sorghum, he will put more cowpea in the system.
But it sounds like that there's the decision of the farmers plays a really important role to decide which cultivar that should actually be used.
Yeah, effectively. Yeah. And I do not present, but the experimentation we made in research station, farmers come there to evaluate the system and give their opinion about the results.
Okay, could you shortly comment the online questions that the important improvement in productivity translates into the revenue on the intercropping system?
Sorry, I didn't get.
There's online questions.
Okay.
Did the improvement in productivity translate into revenues on the intercropping system?
For the productivity, I present the land equivalent ratio and the grain yields.
So I guess the answer is yes, because you have comparison with the control more yield. Okay, thank you again.
There's one more question here, Chair.
Pardon?
There's one more question if time allows.
We need to move forward. Sorry for that.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, then thank you again. And then the next question, the next talk will be.
Yeah.
Yeah, Coffee, could you please share the screen?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Let me share my screen.
Yes.
Please, can you see my screen?
Yes, exactly. So now you can switch
Hello?
to the screen mode, please.
It's okay.
Yes, it's
thanks.
okay.
Okay, thank you. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Geoffrey Sosa from Benin. I'm PhD student under the West African Center on Climate Change and Adapted Non-Use Program, University of Bamako, Mali. I want to share with you my work on water use efficiency and the net ecosystem carbon balance assessments from rice cultivation in Benin. This is the outline of our presentation. After that problematic, we talk about the methodology, the result in discussion, and conclusion and perspective. As we know, the water use efficiency and the net ecosystem carbon balance are the key indicator of agro-ecosystem that we use to describe the trade-off between yield and also to quantify the amount of water and soil carbon loss or gain. Then sustaining or even increasing yield while improving water use and limiting carbon loss are very vital for sustainable irrigated rice production. In terms of water management and fertilizer, these two inputs can increase the CO2 emission and then increase the carbon input in the soil and also the evapotranspiration. The aim of this study is to identify the best combination of water management and fertilizer amount in rice production of Benin to improve water use efficiency and grain yield while limiting carbon loss. We conducted this experiment or this study at irrigation of Kusinele in Sweden, Benin, in West Africa. As method, we used a split plot design. Main water management was a main factor and different level of nitrogen was a sub factor. As a water management, as you can see here, because 3 levels of water management. The first one was a continuous flooding. The second one was alternate wetting and drying at 15 depth, and the third one was alternate wetting and drying at 25 depth. As sub factor, we used 3 levels of fertilizer, of nitrogen fertilizer, 90 kg per hectare and 120 kg by hectare. For our experiments, we measure the CO2 and evapotranspiration. As we can see here, we use the transfer chamber, dynamic transfer chamber to measure the net ecosystem exchange and evapotranspiration, and that chamber to measure the ecosystem measurements. For these measurements, we use the low-cost system developed by Bakaga et al. In 2022. And this system is a low-cost system that we developed, and we use Arduino and microcontroller to set the system. So the CO2 exchange and the evapotranspiration were conducted from November 2022 until March 2023 using a closed chamber system. We connected the sensor, the K30 FS sensor to measure the CO2 fluxes and the DRC32 to measure the relative humidity inside the chamber. We also measure some meteorological parameters such as the soil temperature, the air temperature, also the photosynthetic active radiation. As agronomic data, we measure the strain and grain yields, and also we determine the carbon content from the grain. For the flash calculation, we use the air modeler script described by Hoffman et al. In 2015 and Dalmon 2022 for the evapotranspiration. For the gap filling, we use the empirical model described by Hoffman et al. In 2015. For the error calculation and the CO2 statistical analysis, we use a comprehensive error prediction algorithm described by Hoffman et al. In 2019. And also, we calculate the net ecosystem carbon balance and the water use efficiency. So as we can see here, the net ecosystem carbon balance is just the balance between the carbon input and the carbon output. And to obtain the water use efficiency, we divided the dry weight by the evapotranspiration. So what are the results that we got? As we can see here, we have the seasonal dynamic of the RECO and the net ecosystem exchange over the growing season. As we can see here, we notice that the gross, as we can see here, the red line is the ecosystem respiration. The green one is the GPP, the gross product production, primary production, and the blue one is the net ecosystem exchange. So as we can see here, the gross primary production and the ecosystem respiration drive with the growth stage. And also the net ecosystem exchange increase with the end application, except for the treatment, activating and drying at between depth. The net ecosystem exchange range from minus 156 to 329. These funding are in line with those authors like Li et al. In 2019 and Ling et al. In 2016. In this figure, we have the cumulative ecosystem restoration, the gross primary production, the net ecosystem exchange, and the net ecosystem car balance. As we can see here, we can see that the highest gross primary production and the ecosystem respiration was recorded under the continuous flooding with the high amount of fertilizer, and the lowest were recorded using, as we can see here, the GPP, the lowest GPP was recorded under the attenuating and drying at 25 depth. The same thing for the net ecosystem exchange, we have this variation, and as we can see, all the treatments that we can see here are carbon balance for the periods of the measurements. And the highest net ecosystem carbon balance was recorded under the attenuating and drying at 15 depth with the application of NiTrKJ by hectare of nitrogen. In this figure, we have the cumulative evapotranspiration and the water use efficiency. As we can see, the evapotranspiration increased with the end application, and also the evapotranspiration flashes obtained were between 300 and 367 millimeters. The highest water use efficiency, as we can see here, was recorded under the alternate wetting drying at 15 Delft. In terms of grain yield and straw yields, we notice that both grain and straw yield increase with end application, and there is no significant difference between yields under continuous flooding and attenuating and drying at 15 depth. In terms of straw yields, we notice that the highest values were recorded under the continuous flooding, and the lowest values were recorded under the attenuating and drying at 25 depth. So for this 3D, the attenuating and drying at 15 depth achieved the highest net ecosystem carbon balance compared to the continuous flooding rice production. The combination of attenuating and drying at 15 depth and the application of NiTrKJ per hectare of nitrogen demonstrated throughout the study its advantage over the continuous flooding rice production in terms of yields and water use efficiency. The attenuating and drying at 15 depth combined with the NiTrKJ per hectare of nitrogen would be a workable solution for sustainable and environmentally friendly rice cultivation in Sundan, Benin. In perspective for this 3D, only chemical fertilizer were used on this 3D. So it will be also great to associate the organic manure to examine the combined effect on the soil carbon metabolism. Also, for this 3D, it will be great to measure this methane emission from different rice ecosystems in order to determine the full
Kofi, you're muted. Okay, I think Kofi is no longer with us. I don't know why. Kofi, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Ah, yeah, now you're unmuted. Please
So-
conclude.
So I was saying that, so it's also good to assess methane emission from different grass ecosystem to determine the full net ecosystem carbon balance and also the global warming potential from each treatment. So this I want to share with you. Thanks for your attention. Hello?
Yeah.
I have some short questions. In your experiments, you have two different nitrogen level, that is N19, 90 and N120. Am I right?
Yes.
So, and finally, your conclusion is that the N90 will be the environmentally friendly, yeah, the suggestion for the production. So, but do you have any idea how the rice yield will respond to the nitrogen? Because I assume that is not linear relationship.
Yeah.
So could you expect that at which nitrogen level that so further application of nitrogen will be no more beneficial?
Yeah, in terms of grain yields, we notice that when we use the higher amounts, I mean 120 kg per hectare of nitrogen, we get more yield. But if we compare the two, I mean the two levels of nitrogen, we notice that there's no significant difference between the two yields.
Yeah.
So this is the first point in terms of yield. But in terms of water use efficiency, we notice that when we use the 19 kg per hectare, we have more water. We have the high amount of the water use efficiency was higher than when we use the higher amount of nitrogen, I mean 120 kg per hectare. So basically, in terms of yields, in terms of water use efficiency, the use of 90 kg per hectare of nitrogen is better, is benefit.
Okay, thank you. That is great. There's one question online from Caroline that is, what type of nitrogen fertilizer was used in this experiment? And then do you think the other nitrogen fertilizer sources would have given a different outcome?
For this 3D, we use the area for the type of fertilizer. But regarding the second question, yeah, I think that is a perspective. We can also experiment that one and see if we can get the same results. But in this 3D, we use area as N fertilizer.
Okay, we still have time for one short question.
Yeah.
No, from the audience. And then thank you again to Kofi. And then yeah, later we'll have the panel discussion. So,
Good. Thank you.
Thanks. So the next one will be the presentation from Alexander. Yeah. And then the floor is yours. Can you hear me? It's just good. All right, then. I have a few notes. Yes, I think that's the correct one.
Yeah. Okay, then welcome everybody. I am Alexander here from the Fiebel Institute in Switzerland, Fiebel Research, Fiebel in Switzerland, and I will talk today about environment-specific selection of high-quality cotton cultivars from on-station and on-farm trials. This research that I'm talking to you about today comes from the SGF project, Seeding the Green Future. This project was a cotton breeding project, specifically organic cotton in India. And why we were looking into, not reacting, is it? Okay. Okay, perfect. Okay, so why were we looking at that? The reason for it is that the cotton landscape in India has changed quite dramatically in the last century. Specifically, local indigenous cotton species were prevalent in the past, but have been today mostly replaced by American cotton, mainly genetically modified cotton. The issue with that is that through that, a lot of the varieties that we had in the past got lost and the biodiversity got diminished in the market. Now, why we were looking into the cotton breeding organically is that India's cotton market is huge. About 50% of the cotton worldwide comes from India, but the organic market is rather small, where only 2% of the cotton produced in India is organic certified. Now, this is relevant for smallholder farmers that have not many means, as they are by default organic, but they don't have the resources to actually find these cotton cultivars. And where we wanted to then look into the site-specific breeding specifically, as we wanted to make cotton cultivars for them that were specifically adapted to the local environments. Now, the project is the biggest organic cotton breeding project in India right now. It is spanning 7 different states in India that you can see here. And the project used the, oops, maybe I'll, can remove the, So the cotton project was using a participatory approach. Is it? Okay, anyway, I think then we'll continue like this. Then I'll just have to tell you. Okay, so the project used a participatory organic plant breeding program. This program specifically involves the farmers, and through this can provide can improve efficiency while also empowering the local farmers in the decision making. And now in this project we had 2 different types of trials. On the one hand, we had on-station trials that were located in 5 different sites with our partners, where we looked at 29 different cultivars for various different traits, yield traits, as well as quality traits. And then we had the on-farm trials. These were directly on the farms of with the partner farmers, where we looked at 33 cultivars. And on these farms, the farmers could choose themselves which cultivars they want to produce, as long as they had included both species and as long as they included 1 commercial check, which was repeated on each farm and in each year. Now, statistically, we analyzed this through, in 2 ways. The on-station trials, as well as when we were looking at agroecological zones, we analyzed through a GGE biplot model. And on-farm trials, we were looking at through a hierarchical Bayesian genotype by environment model, which was specifically created to analyze this type of data, because this model allows us to prevent poor estimations due to the missing genotype by environment combinations on the farms. And all of this was done in R with the PPB stats program, which was specifically developed for participatory plant breeding data. Yeah, so to our results, I will talk only about yields today, but we also looked at quality traits such as fiber length, but time-wise, we will look at yield today. Now, what you see there on your right is one of these GGE biplots. How you can read such a plot is that we have each point is a cultivar, where we have the empty points are the hybrids, the full points, we have the full triangles are the regular cultivars, and the downwards triangles were the hirsutum, the American cotton, and the upwards triangles are the local indigenous arboreum varieties. Now, the red lines intersect the plot into different sectors. Within each sector, the cultivars performed similarly to each other. And if cultivars were in the same sector as a location, which you see in green, that means that these cultivars performed well in these locations. And on the polygon on the outside, we can see the best performing cultivars for each sector. Now, what we found from this, first of all, is that we found that varieties perform quite differently depending on the sites. You can see that how spread out the sites are on this graph. Next, we noticed that varieties spread on site perform better than other varieties. One example would be number 13 on top, which was a cultivar that was specifically bred in Akola and was also the best performer in Akola when it came to yield. Now, conventional cotton cultivars performed best in high input sites. The highest input site we had was Pipalgon, and we can see these empty triangles, how they cluster there around that site, indicating the higher performance there. However, the indigenous organic cultivars outperformed conventional cultivars in other locations that had lower inputs, such as mudding, which you see on the right there. Now, cultivars also performed similar in Kandwa and mudding, which you see there on the right, which makes these two sites into a mega environment. So when we speak of a mega environment, yeah, that's what we see there. So if we have multiple locations clustered in one sector, we can identify that that cultivars perform similarly in these specific locations. So through that, we can also identify mega environments, which allows us to make the whole process of selecting cultivars feasible, as we can't just breed specifically on each farm the specific cultivars. And notably in mega environments also depend very much on the trait that we are looking at. So different locations can cluster depending on the trait. Now, from the results, what we see here is exactly what I mentioned before, that the hybrid hirsutum varieties, which are here abbreviated with HH, performed very well in Pipalgon. This is a rank list with the green cultivars performing best and the red ones the worst. And in mudding, it was exactly the opposite, where these ones performed the worst. Now, for the on-farm trials, we looked at the Bayesian model, and what we found is the 3 distinct farm clusters that we see there on the map. These farm clusters did not correlate with geographical location, so we couldn't use the geographical location for this type analysis to inform farmers what type of cultivars perform best. So we also used the GGE biplot model when we grouped these farms in agroecological zones, and found that a lot of these agroecological zones perform similarly. Specifically, we found 3 mega environments. We found 3 mega environments. This is again the graphic that I showed before, where we can see the best performers. And on the right, we see these 3 mega environments. On the bottom there, you see the agroclimatic zones, which had a similar performance. And we see that we can actually group these agroecological zones when it comes to yield of these cotton varieties. Now, what does this mean? We found that the indigenous Gossypium arboreum cultivars outperformed the ubiquitous Gossypium hirsutum in low input sites, further highlighting the importance of site-specific selection, specifically for organic low input farms. Then we've identified farm clusters through the Bayesian model. These farm clusters are specifically useful for the participating farmers in this project, as they can have a tailored recommendation of what cultivars work the best on their specific farm. And then we found that the environment has a significant effect on the cotton cultivar performance. This is the red line going through this study, and therefore the site-specific cultivar selection is recommended from our side. And lastly, we identified mega environments, which can be very useful when we make recommendations to policymakers and stakeholders on which cotton cultivars should be used for the future. And with that, I'm on the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for listening, and now I'll probably have some questions.
So thank you, Alex. So very good in time. So and we have time for 2 questions. Yes, please.
Hi, Alex. Thanks for your very nice presentation. I was just wondering if you would happen to know the assumptions behind this model that you've used for the G into E interactions.
The assumption.
Yeah.
In what sense do you mean?
Like what kind of priori assumptions it is using? What kind of data do you need, or
what kind of? So this is just
the environmental data.
Yeah. So we use the year data. We use the. It's rather simple actually for what inputs you need. We have the year, for example, as a random variable, but also then the environment and just the raw yield data that we use as the main factors in the model. So, yeah. And one thing I forgot to mention about these, it's when we speak about the best performing cultivars, we're speaking about the combination of not just the value of the yield, so the highest yielding ones, but also the trait stability. So how variable were these traits over the years?
So further questions. I have one question. So I don't know how should I interpret the mega environment.
Yep.
Does it mean they have a kind of similarity?
Exactly. So what it means for the for these cultivars that we were evaluating is, if I show this slide again. Yeah. So this is this one works as well. This is the rank table of the cultivars that we were testing. So we see that that we have the first 3, for example, agroecological zones. We see that most cultivars performed very similar in these. So the ranking is very similar between these 3 agroclimatic zones. So that means that we can actually, when we were looking at that, we can look it on the scale of all these 3 agroclimatic zones when it comes to these cultivars that we were testing.
And how exactly is this? How would you characterize the environment?
Of how to characterize
what's the differences between them?
Well, the agroclimatic zones, they're very clearly defined regions in India. So these are how we define the environments. But of course, we have a lot of variation within these environments. Of course, for a well, macro level evaluation, we can pool that and make general recommendations, as this is generally the case for other cultivars today, even though it might not be perfect in every instance. And to be perfect in the instance, that's exactly why we use the Bayesian model as well. So for the participating farmers, we can tell them exactly which cultivars will be best suited for their farms. Yeah.
Mhm. Okay. Although I still have thousands of questions of all 5 excellent talks, but I think we have now really run out of the time. And thank you, Alex, again. And then so I think now is the evening network session. And thanks everyone for the participation, and see you tomorrow.